thriving, playing, living life to the fullest. Our mission for Kansans since 2003. We are Kansas Spine and Specialty Hospital, proudly supporting KPTS, Public Television for Kansas.
The following program is brought to you by TZ Productions, offering 40 years of media experience.
On this edition of Hatteberg's People,
one of Wichita's last surviving Tuskegee Airmen talks about World War II, segregation, and his old car that just wouldn't quit.
Plus, he admitted he ran the crookedest business in Buhler, and one day in 1977, Willie Friesen invited me in so he could explain himself. I'm Larry Hatteberg.
I'm Susan Peters. Those stories and many more coming your way right now on Hatteberg's People.
These stories are like old friends. Their lives radiate from the screen like prophets of the past. They were teachers, but not in a classroom. Instead, they taught about life to those around them who cared to listen, and I was their student. They put their lives on the line for a nation that discriminated against them, and their heroics helped turn the tide of segregation.
In World War II, African Americans were required to serve in all black units. The success of the Tuskegee Airmen demonstrated that courage, integrity, and skill that knows no color bounds.
And now meet a member of that group, Colonel George Boyd. Now, he overcame so much and accomplished, again, a lot in his life. He had a lot in common with an '88 Buick.
Oh yeah, it's comfortable. You can see where everything's worn just the way I've been using it. It's very comfortable for me.
It should be. George is just about to put 400,000 miles on this 1988 Buick Riviera. More about that in a moment.
All in all, I'm proud of this vehicle, and I think American products will hold up just as well as any other products. That's a better one. That's my first sergeant. Cecil P. McRae was his name.
While we're visiting with him, take a look at these pictures. George was one of the historic Tuskegee Airmen of World War II, one of those black airmen who fought in a segregated unit and trained in Tuskegee, Alabama.
Well, these were the historical events that were going on in the country, and we were all just part of that.
Being a black American in World War II was difficult, but Boyd holds no animosity.
Everybody resents any form of degradation, and so what I'm saying is minorities are no exception. We were the targets at that particular time, but I didn't carry animosity toward people. I just figured there was good folks and bad folks.
He retired from the Air Force as a major, but his active duty service years were like music to him. And so is this. He's also a jazz drummer and plays sometimes at a local nightclub.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. It's relaxing, and I know most of the music they play.
And I'm not done yet. He's currently Colonel George Boyd and commands the Kansas Civil Air Patrol.
We're always looking here to see if any birds are nesting in the engine. It's an opportunity to serve and feel productive, because being a retired person, this is really a great experience.
Now, about that car with nearly 400,000 miles.
And we've never touched that engine except to keep it tuned, and we've had to replace some of the peripherals that are constantly going, like the water pump and things like that. But the engine, we have not touched that engine.
George Boyd is like his car. In war and peace, he just keeps running.
There ain't no more bad days for me. If I have a day, it's a good one.
Since that story first aired in 2010, there is both good news, Susan, and bad news.
That's right. The good news is George is still active and doing well at age 90. The bad news, that '88 Buick is not.
No, shortly after the odometer hit 400,000 miles, another car rammed into it while George was driving. Now, George was ejected. He was injured too, but he did make a full recovery. The Buick, however, well, it was total.
But 400,000 miles, that's incredible.
Yep, he got his money's worth,
He
didn't
sure
he?
did. Well, you know, heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Darwin Seal was a hero to customers at the Dillon store in Wellington.
Now, whether it was a smile, a kind word, or a hug, Darwin made the day a little brighter for most everyone he came across. Now, this story is from 2011.
Even before the birds are up, as the sun is massaging its morning glow, Darwin Seal is already at work, 7 to 4. That's his schedule.
He's a treasure.
In Wellington, past the water tower on the other side of town, is the Dillon store. That's where he works.
Hello there.
Darwin is one of our best ambassadors that any store I've ever worked at.
How are you this morning?
He has the gift of not only making people feel comfortable.
I bought a few groceries here.
Sure did. Then she ran that clothing store. I used to go in there and buy clothes from her.
Yep.
He always makes a point to speak to each and every one of them.
Yeah. Good morning.
He began here 5 decades ago in high school.
I was a sophomore in high school, yes.
At 16.
Okay, you just want to put them all back here? Okay. Well, I needed a job for one thing, and they had advertised in the paper that they were going to open the new store, and so I just went and applied for the job.
And Darwin is just amazing and very, very nice, and always a pleasure to talk to when we come out.
This was the new store where Darwin began back in 1962 that Dillon's built for $200,000. Sheila Lowry from Dillon's corporate headquarters surprised Darwin with a newspaper showing the day the store opened.
Yeah? Look how much you can buy coffee for, and sugar and stuff. And see, we open at 8:30 in the morning and close at 8 o'clock at night.
And the parking space, I like that it's enough parking for 125 cars.
Yeah, that's true.
Darwin's nearly 50-year run will come to an end next month. He has decided to retire, and for him, that's a life-changing decision.
Go ahead. Because I've been so used to getting up, going somewhere every morning to work, you know, it's going to be different.
I don't know who they're going to have to tell us hello when we come.
Darwin is the 3rd longest-serving employee in Dillon's history.
Oh, I think Darwin knows everybody in town, and by their first name. Yeah. And on his days off, he sits in there because he has to visit.
Yeah. Well, I said it's the only job I ever had, so I just stuck with it. I've got to know people real well. They can't believe that I'm still here. Well, Bev, thank you so much.
Thank you, dear. He's a good one.
You appreciate it. Well, I had always just worked, and I just kept on working. I never given a thought about going anywhere else to work. I was still just working, but I just kept on working.
That last customer, she was actually crying saying goodbye to Darwin.
She was emotional. Other customers would get emotional around Darwin too. That's how much he meant to them. And unfortunately, working seems to be what kept Darwin going all those years. Now, he retired 2 weeks after I did that story. Unfortunately, a few months later, he died of a heart attack. Now, several years later, Darwin is still fondly remembered by the people of Wellington. They still talk about him, and will for a long time. So he's gone, but of course not forgotten.
I don't think he'll ever be forgotten in that town.
Not in Wellington.
Now to somebody else who really loved their job.
Yeah, she's Dorothy Snider, and she was the tour guide at the historic Seeley Mansion in Abilene.
The Seeley Mansion has 25 rooms, and to me it is arranged just for common living so that anybody could live here and enjoy it.
The mansion was built in 1905 at a cost of $55,000. The Seeleys' daughters, Helen and Marion, were just girls when it was built. They never married and lived in the home into their 90s until they passed away. Now the mansion is open to tourists, and Dorothy Snider makes that history come alive.
These 3 buttons were in the parents' bedroom, and they would summons whichever maid they wanted, and the buttons are pearl buttons to summons maids.
The family's money came from the sisters' father, who made his fortune in patent medicine, founding the A.B. Seeley Medical Company. Some of that medicine still on display at the mansion.
I've lived a good many years and used some of these products, so it takes you back to the good old days.
The Seeley family lived in luxury for the time. Many of their furnishings purchased at the 1904 World's Fair, like this fireplace.
Well, it was designed by Tiffany at the World's Fair, And the tile is from Venice, Italy. Italy had the very best tile. Any dresser that's extremely low is called a gentleman's dresser. It gives the appearance of a full-length mirror. Father and mother wanted their daughters to have something very special at the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904, and they bought each of them a set of silver mirror and brush. This one has Helen's name on it, and the adjoining room, Marion has her set.
There are 11 bedrooms, a ballroom, servants' quarters, and a myriad of bathrooms within the 11,000 square feet of living space. But one of the more unusual items is this: a bowling alley. Again purchased at the 1904 World's Fair. Upstairs, book collections that any book lover would salivate over.
One of my tourists asked me to lift the lid to the Mark Twain books, and a couple of years ago, for the very first time, I discovered the authorized unified edition of my books, Mark Twain. Now, can you put a price on a set of books with a signature like that?
Dorothy is full of information and anecdotes about the family, and this mansion is just as the sisters left it. Their dolls on the dressers, the wash basins, and the pitchers waiting, as if for the Seeleys to return.
Oh, I can give the tour 4 times a day, and I never tire of it. The beauty of the antiques and the well-kept house makes it enjoyable.
Now, Dorothy knows all the history, and people remember her. The red shoes on the blouse, and the name Dorothy.
And then they always bid me, "Goodbye, Dorothy. Dorothy, goodbye."
Now, Dorothy has since retired, but the mansion is still open for tours every day of the week in Abilene. If you haven't been there, you should go.
Actually, I have been there.
The Seeley Mansion.
Oh,
All right.
I loved it. The history in that mansion.
It's great, isn't it?
It is wonderful. We're going to head west to Russell County, and you might find Fred Whitman there, adding some flair to the natural beauty of the Kansas countryside.
Yeah, he's a California sculptor who travels to Lucas every spring to transform the limestone fence posts unique to that area into one-of-a-kind work of art.
You can see their faces over there along the highway, standing tall in limestone, embedded in the Kansas prairie.
For me, that's really, sort of the reason I came in the first place, was to leave something that would hopefully last as long as the post has lasted already.
Fred Whitman sees these rolling hills along the highway south of Lucas as one of the repositories of his art, the historic post rocks standing as prairie sentries.
This is a post-rock scenic highway, so people come up and down this highway just to see these posts, and if they get turned on to these carvings, and that's, to me, that's enough right there. I got paid already.
Whitman is a California artist who works primarily with Kansas limestone. His current project, former Kansas Senator Bob Dole.
And he's in there. When I get involved in these projects, it's all that's on my mind. I did do a fair amount of research on Bob Dole, and everything I read I liked.
For the past 8 years, Fred has used the Kansas limestone from post-rock country to create his art, and with these sculptures, you can tell he has no shortage of talent.
Since I do enjoy doing this so much, I don't know how I could create a better life for myself. And then each of these stones is different when they come to me. These raw fence post stones that are out here in the field, they each have their own character to them. Well, I'm definitely getting there. I mean, it's got a long way to go. I mean, right now on this rock, the tip of the nose is probably the only thing that's in the right spot.
Now, with the Bob Dole art in its early stages when this story was shot, it is interesting to know if those faces by Highway K232 are of anyone in particular. Well, turns out they are. This is Jana. She is the daughter of Richard and Kay Metlin of Lucas. And this is Chelsea Kane. Now, her father is a local rancher and the one who arranged for Fred's current project, the Bob Dole statue, which will be placed at the Russell County Courthouse.
So it's not just going to be a portrait, of a man. It's going to be art.
As he chips, cuts, and hammers away, Whitman says it is the people of Kansas who changed his life and keep him coming back.
The people that I met really sold me. It's just, for me, it's a magical experience.
Now, the Dole sculpture isn't yet finished. He has several days of work left, but he sent this picture today. An artist carving the statesman and the Kansas people becoming the rock that binds these men together.
That's another great thing is, as long as I can still see, Bob Dole inside here, then I'm happy. I'm happy because I know this is going to turn out right.
Now that Dole sculpture now sits in the entryway of the Russell County Courthouse. Meanwhile, Fred continues to visit Kansas so he can continue his carving along the post-rock scenic byway. And for people who drive up into northwest Kansas and they see those post rocks up there, somewhere you'll see Fred's work on some of those limestone posts.
I'm going to have to drive up there. It's interesting. You can do art with any medium,
Absolutely.
I guess, right?
And he does it great. All right, now to the crookedest man in Buhler. I showed up at his door with the camera rolling.
If you've been in Buhler for more than 5 minutes, you've probably heard about Willie Friesen.
I have the crookedest business in town. You want to come in and see it?
Willie grinds crankshafts, and that's his crooked business. And he does it with such precision that he does business from all over the state. Willie has been in some form of machine work all his life, and the one thing he won't tolerate is shoddy workmanship.
I do believe that some of the factory things are not done according to, for the public, the way it should be. They're just doing it to make money, and I don't believe in that. That's the way it should be, just like that.
When Willie gets tired or friends drop in, work sometimes stops, and the men retire to the domino game not far from his lathe.
Well, sir, it's a mission, really. I try to help out people so that when they come for some work that I do, and I have helped them, then I figure I have done something special for the world, really.
Crankshafts may be his business, but joking and having a good time is also high on his list of priorities.
Yeah, I enjoy anything. People come in here, and that's how they know how I act. And I can't help it. I just pull those jokes. I have all kinds of jokes. I better not tell them on TV.
Willie Friesen, a man who grinds those crooked crankshafts, but plays it straight when it comes to the quality of life. From Buhler, Kansas, this is Larry Hatteberg.
So he rode his bicycle to and from work.
That's right.
Very
That's right.
simple,
Very
fun
normal
life.
in a small town.
Yeah. Another real character from the 1970s was Les Roper.
Yeah, now good old Les was a novelist who lived in the tiny town of Girard. And in the same vein as Hemingway, he marched to the beat of his own drum.
Les Roper lives in this 97-year-old home near Girard's Town Square. And if you didn't know him, you might think he's just downright unfriendly. But that's not really the case. Roper is a full-time novelist, writing one paperback in 60 to 90 hours. But he only writes from 8:30 to 11 a.m. weekdays, and that's when he doesn't like to be disturbed. He's a tough-talking, beer-drinking, cigar-smoking guy, but behind that gruff outward appearance seems to be a gentle person. But he probably wouldn't admit it. His writing reflects his personality. Mysteries and westerns with action-packed titles. So what makes Les Roper write?
Well, it beats working for a living. And keeps me off the streets to a certain extent. Irritates a lot of people. Everybody's supposed to go to work from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, whatever it is. Never did like it, so I just don't do it.
Roper consumes 10 to 15 glasses of beer during his morning writing stints from his commercially installed beer keg. He says he just starts writing and counts on the beer to help him with the storyline. His name now appears on the cover of 5 novels, and he freely admits there's not much of a message in his books.
Oh, not really. As far as writing for posterity, I've never been able to put posterity on a plate and eat it, so I'm not real concerned about it. I'm in it for the money.
So how does he handle critics who say there's too much sex and violence in these books?
Well, first thing I'd say is, if you don't like it, don't read it, but I write about what I know, and sex is one thing I've never been too sharp on. There's not that much sex in my books. Now, if you have to use sex to sell a book, then you're not writing. You're cheating.
Once his daily writing time ends, Roper relaxes. This particular day, he was going to help a relative lay carpet. Oh, the unpredictable life of a novelist. This is Larry Hatteberg.
I'm impressed Les could write after a dozen beers in the morning.
Or maybe 15.
Maybe 15,
as he said. That was his way of working.
It was.
Yeah, he said he was a better writer as long as he could drink the beer.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, Les published 11 novels under the pen name of L.V. Roper and Samantha Lester. Who knew? Now, he supplemented his income by teaching at a community college and working as a barber, welder, and Fuller brush salesman. And Les served for 9 years in the Kansas House of Representatives.
He did not.
He did, retiring in 1991. He later died in 1998. Fascinating man to meet, though.
What a full life. He did everything.
And he did it his way.
Isn't
that
sure
nice?
Did. Love that.
Well, time isn't kind to any of us, as we all know when we look in the mirror, but Fred Volker knew how to accept that, and he ended up living a very long life. He was still playing music on his 100th birthday.
Seasons change, and so do people. That's Fred Volker over there in the midst of a house he says needs just a bit of tidying.
Been on my own ever since I was about 20 years old.
You see, Fred's seasons have been many.
No complaints.
He lives over that western Kansas prairie hill, among the trees not far from the water tower at Fort Dodge in Ford County. It is a historic old fort, now a veteran's home, and as the wind teases the flags, the smell of winter not far away. The leaves, like Fred, changing with time.
I've worked all my life. I just get by with what I got.
He is a proud man, self-sufficient. His wife in a nearby rehabilitation center with a broken leg, so he apologizes for the clutter. A few feet away, a case. In it, one of Fred's fiddles.
That's not my best fiddle, but it's the one I like to play. I don't get around too good, Larry.
You see, Fred is an old-time fiddle player. He's in the National Fiddlers Hall of Fame, received over 50 awards, most now given away.
My fiddle's been my friend for several years.
He still plays, but knows the music isn't like it was.
My hand's getting stiff and I can't finger it like I used to, so it bothers me some.
On this, his 100th birthday, he plays for me, but tires easily. The days of touring with the Bob Willis Band back in the 30s and 40s are now images in a photograph. He worked in law enforcement for 30 years, sold cars till he was 95, but fiddling has been his life.
And I've been playing ever since I was about 14 years old.
Outside leaves resist the coming winter, and like the seasons of our life, sometimes all we want is our music to continue.
We just live like old folks and be comfortable and don't want for nothing.
Now, unfortunately, his 100th birthday turned out to be his last. Now, Fred passed away in early 2012. His wife, she died a few months later. She was 92. Fascinating man who lived a great life. I was fortunate just to get him to meet him for just a little bit of a slice of time.
And it was a good slice of time. It was when he turned 100. I mean, that's beautiful.
It's perfect timing. Perfect timing.
Well, no matter how old you get, there's something about model trains that a lot of people, mostly men, never outgrow. And with the state of the world seemingly crazier than ever, right? Fred Kemp still finds his trains to be a much-needed escape.
There's so much chaos in the world at this place where I can come and everything's organized. Keeps you from worrying about things that are no value or you can't really think about.
Just take a look around Fred Kemp's train room. Here, He houses his collection of engines and cars, and it is a bit overwhelming.
Well, I have about 200 train sets. And some of the sets have 2 cars, some have 3 or 4 or 5.
From floor to ceiling, every wall space is full of trains, all kinds.
I had visited a lot of other train collectors and saw what made their trains look good and what made their rooms look good. And I tried to synthesize all of the good ideas and put them together in this one room. This belonged to my father when he was very young. It was Lionel's version of the German Big Bertha cannon. They didn't sell very many because of that, I don't think. So it's a very rare piece. When I was very young, our family was very poor, and my dad had a large stack of catalogs for toy trains. And if I find a piece of junk, I like to restore it back to the way they looked in those catalogs.
Fred spends hours and days restoring these old trains, and for him, it's part of his family history. And he remembers that day in the late 30s when his parents were in economic difficulties, and during that time as a child, he had a small train, but he wanted a larger one.
Lionel was trying to sell their magazine, and if you sold 8 subscriptions to the magazine, they would give you a free locomotive. So my father sold 8 subscriptions to the Lionel magazine, and this was my Christmas present. I was awake nearly all night thinking about how I was going to keep it oiled and keep it polished and keep it running beautiful like in the book.
It is a collection of a lifetime.
I've always enjoyed working with tools and fixing things, and this is just more of the same.
Car by car, engine by engine, Fred Kemp has collected, restored, rebuilt, and rekindled those childhood memories.
I guess the good Lord has been blessing me with being able to come up with fulfilling a lot of my desires.
In many ways, he's the child who never grew up.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I think so too.
What an amazing collection.
Yeah, he's always been on the right track.
Oh, Larry, no.
I love that. All right, well, not much has changed with Fred since I did that story back in 2011, other than his train collection has gotten even bigger.
Well, that's all for now, but the Hatteberg train keeps on rolling along. Next time...
I'm 81 right now. I've been in a bathtub one time.
Don't let that scare you off. You're not going to want to miss this trip back to the 80s. Fred Sherman used to play for silent movies. In later years, he performed at probably the only grain elevator with a piano. Another classic Kansas character.
All right, everybody, thanks for watching. And remember, if you have any comments or suggestions, be sure and drop us a line. The email address is hattebergspeople@kpts.org. We'd love to hear from you, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
The preceding program was brought to you by TZ Productions, offering 40 years of media experience.